Hello ENC 1102 students. I'm broadcasting from your classroom, which unfortunately we've all learned that we will not be revisiting during the school year. So it looks like most of our instruction is going to keep happening here through YouTube. So what I want to do is I want to introduce you to a new unit. By the time you watch this, you will have already turned in your informative essay with surprising reversal, taken the test on the textbook related to those chapters, and now we're ready for our final chapter. Remember that informative essay and our next essay, called the classical argument, are the ones that FIU considers to be the most important. So if you can't write those, we can't give you credit. So we need your best effort going into this next one, the classical argument. Most of you know that when I start an exercise, we start with some pre-writing exercises. So I want you to know that this first exercise here deals with these little birds here called starlings. And it asks you to consider a situation here. And it asks you to answer some questions and to write about this situation where these starlings invaded somebody's home. So you're going to free write here in a little box. And I'm going to ask you to contact a classmate to kind of see how your classmate answered that, to see if maybe you agree or disagree on the way you presented that. Remember, you're just free writing for 3 or 4 minutes. Then it asks you either alone or with a classmates to kind of sort out these proposals you've made, ranking them from best to worst. And then I direct you to your textbook. Our first reading in the textbook, pages 339 to 340, to learn what exactly do we mean by argument. After you complete this, then I'm going to direct you to 2 more pages in the textbook, so you learn a little bit more about what it means to write an argument. And then what I have here in blank, I'm going to show you what it's going to look like when it's done. This is us brainstorming some questions for what we're going to write our classical argument about. Our classical argument is stated as a question. An argument question is one that when you propose it to a group of people, one half of them might answer the question this way and another half of them might answer it another way. So an argument question where you don't get any disagreement is not a good argument question. You'll learn more about this as you go through the book and go through the exercises. So the first thing I ask you to do here is I ask you to think back in ENC 1102. You've already read 7 sources so far about a certain topic. And I said, well, how would you describe that topic, that your 7 sources, what do they all have in common? So me, I always have a topic while you're writing. So my topic that I've been researching is related to using students' test scores to calculate teacher salaries. Another way you could look at these topics I've been exploring are government regulations in schools. So that's the first thing you got to tell me. What is it that your 7 articles have in common? And there might be more than one answer here. The next question I get to is I ask you, I say, well, let's think back to the double entry notes that you took about those sources, and let's start thinking about some possible argument questions. So argument questions that come out of reliable sources. Many of you submitted reliable sources for sources 1 to 7. But if I told you that one of your sources had questionable credibility, you might not look to that one to get ideas for maybe what you want to write about. This should be a question that interests a variety of audiences. It shouldn't just be one group of people that cares about it. There should be several groups of people. And remember, arguments cannot be only answered one way. They should be able to answer at least 2 different ways. Argument questions that start with should or would or is or are or would are usually good sentence starters. So I'm going to show you from my 2 topics here, using students' test scores to calculate teacher salaries, and this other one of government regulations in schools, led me to consider these 4 different questions. My first one is, what would be the fairest and most effective way to pay public school teachers? That's a great argument question because not everyone would agree what would be the most fair and the most effective way. Some people might say this, some people might say that. Here's another question. Should charter schools be forced to accept any student who applies there? Another good argument, because some people would say, yes, charter schools should accept those students. Other people would say, no, it's different for charter schools. So remember, a question that invites differing points of view are a good argument question. Here's the third one I have. Are all public school teachers deserving of the same salary? Some people might say yes. Other people might say no, the sign of a good argument. And then finally, would test score based bonuses be the best way to increase pay for teachers? So I like this a phrase here. Would something be the best way to do something? We see this a lot in argument. So this sums up your first pre-writing exercise. And once you turn that in, I'll tell you what your next assignment's going to be. Okay, let's go.